some people don't realize. They learned to become emotionally invisible. Not completely. Just quiet enough not to create tension. They close doors softly. Walk carefully through the house. Apologize before they even know if they did something wrong. They check people's moods before speaking. And somehow, relaxing makes them feel guilty. Most of these habits don't look emotional. They just look like personality. Being easygoing, independent, observant, low maintenance. But psychology sees something else. Because sometimes, the habits people call normal are actually survival behaviors the nervous system learned very early in life, especially in homes where emotional needs were ignored, dismissed, or simply never noticed. And the strange part is, many people carry these patterns for years, without realizing they were adapting to an emotional environment all along. So in this video, we're going to explore some of the small everyday habits that can quietly reveal childhood emotional neglect, not through dramatic memories, but through the tiny behaviors people stopped questioning a long time ago. One of the clearest examples of this is something most people never even notice about themselves: the way they move through their own home. Some people naturally walk quietly, not because they're trying to be polite, but because their body learned very early that being unnoticed felt safer than being noticed. They close cabinets carefully, avoid making noise at night, instinctively lower the volume of their footsteps, even when nobody ever asked them to. And if you ask them why they do it, most of them won't have an answer, because by adulthood, the behavior no longer feels emotional. It just feels normal. But psychology has observed this pattern for years. Children who grow up around tension, criticism, unpredictability, or emotionally reactive environments often become extremely aware of the amount of space they take up. Not only emotionally, physically too. So without realizing it, their nervous system starts associating silence with safety. And what's fascinating is that these habits often remain long after the original environment is gone. The body keeps remembering what the mind stopped thinking about. Trauma specialist Dr. Bessel van der Kolk has written extensively about how the nervous system can continue reacting to emotional environments long after the original situation is gone. In other words, the body can keep remembering patterns the conscious mind stopped noticing years ago. And once you notice this pattern, you start seeing another behavior that tends to appear right beside it: the habit of emotionally scanning people before interacting with them. Some people can walk into a room and instantly feel when something is off. Nobody has said anything yet. Nobody looks obviously upset. And so, they already sense tension. They notice a different tone of voice, shorter answers, a small shift in facial expression, the energy of the room changing slightly. And most of the time, they're right. From the outside, this can look like emotional intelligence. And technically it is. But for many people, it began as adaptation. Because children who grow up in emotionally unpredictable environments often learn that understanding the mood of the room isn't just social awareness. It's preparation. Their brain becomes trained to detect emotional changes early, before conflict happens, before someone gets irritated, before the atmosphere changes, before they need to emotionally protect themselves. And after years of doing this automatically, many people become so good at reading others that they completely lose the habit of checking in with themselves, which leads to another surprisingly common behavior: not knowing what you actually want. Not in some dramatic life purpose way. Just simple things. What do you want to eat? Where do you want to go? What do you feel like doing? And suddenly, your mind goes blank. Not because you're trying to be agreeable. You genuinely don't know. Because when someone grows up in an environment where their emotions, preferences, or comfort were rarely noticed, the brain slowly stops prioritizing those signals. Other people's emotions become louder than your own. Psychologist Dr. John Ice Webb, who popularized the term childhood emotional neglect, explains that children whose emotions are consistently ignored often grow up disconnected from their own feelings, preferences, and emotional needs. So over time, Many people become incredibly skilled at adapting to others, while becoming strangely disconnected from themselves. And eventually, this constant adaptation creates another habit that many people mistake for maturity, becoming extremely independent, not in a healthy, confident way, but in a quiet, almost automatic way, where asking for help starts to feel uncomfortable. Some people struggle alone for far longer than they need to, not because they want to, because something inside them learned very early that needing support felt unsafe, disappointing, or pointless. So instead of asking for help, they minimize the problem. I'm fine. It's okay. I'll figure it out. Even when they're overwhelmed. And after enough years, self-reliance stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like identity. They become the person who handles everything alone, the person who never needs much, never asks for much, never expects much. But underneath that independence, there's often a nervous system that stopped expecting emotional support a long time ago. And strangely, many people with this pattern feel deeply uncomfortable when someone genuinely tries to care for them, not because they dislike kindness, because receiving support can feel unfamiliar, even exposing. For some people, being emotionally cared for creates more tension than being emotionally alone. And once the nervous system gets used to functioning this way, rest itself can start to feel uncomfortable too. Some people sit down to relax and immediately feel guilty. They finally have free time and suddenly become restless. Their body stays tense during peaceful moments, like it's still waiting for something, waiting for interruption, waiting for criticism, waiting for emotional tension to return. And this happens because many children who grew up in emotionally neglectful environments never fully learned that rest was safe. In some homes, peace felt temporary. In others, productivity brought validation, while rest brought judgment. So the nervous system stayed alert, always slightly prepared. Even years later, calm can still feel unfamiliar to the body. And one of the most invisible effects of this is that many people become incredibly harsh with themselves, while being deeply compassionate with everyone else. They replay small mistakes for hours, overthink simple interactions, criticize themselves for things they would instantly forgive in another person. And most of the time, they don't even realize how harsh their inner voice has become. Because when emotional neglect happens early, children often don't blame the environment. They blame themselves. And over time, that voice slowly becomes internal, quiet, constant, automatic. But here's the important part. None of these habits mean someone is broken. In many cases, they were intelligent adaptations, ways the nervous system learned to create safety, predictability, or emotional protection inside environments where those things were missing. The problem is that survival patterns often remain long after survival is no longer necessary. Sometimes, healing begins the moment a person finally realizes, maybe this was never just my personality. And maybe that's the strangest part of all this. Many people spend years believing these behaviors are simply who they are, that they were just born more anxious, more quiet, more careful, more emotionally alert than everyone else. But sometimes, what looks like personality is actually memory. Not the kind of memory you consciously remember, the kind your nervous system remembers. Because children adapt quietly. They learn how to avoid tension, how to stay emotionally safe, how to become easier to handle, easier to ignore, easier to disappoint without reacting. And eventually, those adaptations become so automatic that they stop feeling learned. They start feeling like identity. But recognizing these patterns isn't about blaming parents. And it isn't about seeing yourself as damaged. It's about understanding something important. Your mind was trying to protect you, even in ways you never noticed. Sometimes, healing doesn't begin with changing who you are. Sometimes it begins the moment you finally realize why you became this way in the first place.